Hello everyone, welcome to episode 18 of the iSphere. I'm I for Scotland.
I'm Joy.
And today we have quite an interesting topic to talk about. Basically, Joy's made me watch something garbage against my will, and we're now going to actually discuss it. But it's the new Watcher series on Netflix. So we're probably going to start with like a recap of what the story is actually based on, because it is one of those based on a true story things. And then we'll probably talk about how Netflix has taken the story and just shat it into space. I don't like
it genuinely feels like they tried to make it into American Horror Story meets the Amityville Horror House.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do with it, and then it became a game of Clue. And then I felt like I watched about 5 different shows in one show, and not in a good way.
Yeah, like pacing was like dire, and like there's just a lot of key things that the series kind of misses, and I think we're going to be talking about that. And obviously, I mean, this is a true crime. This is something that did happen to a family. Not so much the Netflix show, but you know, it is based on something that did happen. And then, of course, we're going to kind of maybe bring that out into a wider conversation about how, like, Netflix does its thing, and like true crime and the kind of what I would describe
Netflix
as
makes a lot of money on exploiting the victims of crime, which I am not particularly a fan of. No shade to anyone that does. I mean, I still do enjoy things like we're talking about BuzzFeed Unsolved. I still do enjoy those things, but I also feel like there's some distance for some of the cases that are involved, whereas the things that Netflix have done recently, like the Dahmer tapes and everything else, it's recent, and there are families objecting to it, which makes me uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then there's also the NBC one that I was telling you about, which was the something about Pam, I think it is.
Yeah.
And that one's uncomfortable, especially because the daughters are now on TikTok begging people not to watch it. So it's we're gonna get a little bit into it. We're gonna get a little bit into it.
And I suppose to kind of start, I think the most recent Watcher letter, we'll give an overview of it, but this is as recent as like 2018, 2017, 2018.
There was one in 2019 was the final.
Right, okay. So it's like, it's recent to the point that, you know, it's fairly fresh. So, Joy, do you maybe want to start by giving a brief overview of the actual case that happened?
So there was this family who moved into a lovely home, and I'm actually going to pull it up because I'm now blanking on the details because of course I am. But it was this family that moved into a house in
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah. We don't need to go into details on the family or anything like that. To be honest, I actually prefer that we don't. But like, family move into a house in New Jersey and they receive a letter in their letterbox. It is, of course, one of those letterboxes that you only kind of see in America, where it's like the one with the wee flag and it's like at the end of the drive. It's not like through the letterbox in the front door, which is probably more common here. But they receive a letter from someone who
terms themselves the Watcher.
Yeah.
They call themselves the Watcher, and it's a very kind of creepy and very chilling letter that, oh, I love your house. I mean, it could have been just I love your house. I love watching it and admiring the architecture, which we'll get into because that is also where this tradition started. But it's really creepy, and it refers to the children as things like young blood. Do they know what's in the basement? Do you know the secrets of the walls? I would be too scared to let them play in the basement. Like, it's very creepy. It's very stalkery. Yeah. It's not nice. If you got that when you were moving in and someone started threatening your 3 children, I would move out.
Yeah.
I would immediately sell and just be gone if I could. Unfortunately, that the family involved were not able to do that. And there is some conflicting stories about why that happened. There's some conspiracy theories about how it was, the people of the town made it so that they couldn't sell because they didn't like them.
Yeah.
But
And
it's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a weird one. So they receive several letters, and like the family at the time went to the police. The police said, don't share the details of the letters or tell anyone about the letters. Don't tell your neighbours. Like, technically everyone could be suspect. I said suspect, really weird there. Suspect. Mm-hmm. They could be suspects. There we go. But like over the course of like the actual true case, they had several suspects in the community, and it never really turned up with anything. Everyone was kind of ruled out. There was one person who there's a kind of tie-in with the show. One of the suspects was someone who was a gamer, which is a thing that is like in the Netflix series. But for the real life thing, someone said that someone was playing a game where they play
his girlfriend was like, oh, he's been playing a violent video game.
A violent video game where he plays a character called the Watcher. That is
the Witcher.
It's gotta be the Witcher. There's no way. But yeah, so Creepy Letters is basically the premise of the story. The family have since left the house. They were basically approached.
They sold at a significant loss.
Yeah, they sold at a significant loss. They've been approached when the story went viral. They were approached by several people saying, "Oh, we want rights to the your story. Can we make a film? Can we do a TV series? Can we do whatever it is?" And they basically said no. They've never done an interview until Netflix, for whatever reason, have managed to give them enough money to acquire the rights to the story, and that is basically what the series is all about. And to be honest, I don't really want to dwell on what actually happened to the family. It's in their past now. They've obviously sold the rights to the story. It was a big viral thing and kind of one of those like spookiness kind of cases that has obviously quite a lot of people hooked, and Netflix have decided to make a garbage TV show about it. And that garbage was shared to me by Joy. So Joy, why did you decide to watch The Watcher?
Honestly, because I'd watched the BuzzFeed Unsolved and I knew about it. And I was like, oh, I wonder how Netflix will handle this. And I'm one of those people that if it looks like it's going to be dramatized and it's more fictional, I will kind of look at it, as long as there's been no major like murders or the Netflix thing. I was watching it just because it was also trending on Netflix. And I was like, I need something to watch and to look at. And we'd also talked about doing I've talked about it before, the exploitative nature of reality TV and how it, the borders on like a lot of them are kind of like is it actually child abuse when you take your children onto these reality TV things? Yeah. And it's that kind of curiousness that I came to regret about 15 minutes in. I was like, oh, this is awful. But I also can't bring myself to stop because I want to see how they handle this train wreck. It was different enough from the real story that I was like, oh, I wonder how they're going to do this. And the answer was badly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to pull myself out of it before going in. I was actually wondering if based on a true story is actually more of a legal disclaimer than anything else. Because see if they'd actually made the series. I mean, it's still an atrocious series, but see if they'd just invented it, right? See if it wasn't explicit about a certain case. I think it might have been almost passable.
It would have just been another mediocre drama.
Yeah, it would have been another kind of American Horror Story-ish type thing, But yeah, I think going into it with I watched the BuzzFeed video on it before I watched the TV series. So it was, I'm wondering if my attitude would have been different having watched the series first. But going into it and knowing exactly how the police handled it, how the neighbours handled it, someone was saying earlier in chat, threatening letters are never good, but at the end of the day, compared to what happens in the Netflix fucking drama, it's that is just the mystery of who's sending these letters. So I suppose the TV drama starts with them moving into the house, and I suppose it's worth clarifying that in the real story, the true story, the family never actually moved into the house at all. They were in the middle of renovating it prior to, like, when they started receiving the letters, and because of the letters, they never moved in. But of course, the Netflix series starts with them all moving into the house, and
stubbornly staying there while someone's threatening your children.
Yeah,
which there's a lot of problems I have with it.
So there's
the characterization of the parents, the fact that the children vanish for several episodes and they don't get mentioned.
Yeah. So for those, it's a 4-person family. Your kind of nuclear family. Older sister, younger brother, mum and dad. The series starts with like the husband basically cashing out all of their savings, all of their like their stocks IRA, and bonds, pension. Their IRA, their pension, all to afford this house that they buy for like $3 million or something. And it's hard to really give like a play-by-play of this. We don't think we need to go into like a chronological order. But like one of the things that really irked me is that like in the Netflix show, every single neighbor is like the most like, it's like they were like, we need to make every single neighbor a really colorful character, and they all have to be really, really suspicious. Which I hated immediately, because it's like none of the neighbors were really like that.
It would have been way creepier if the neighbors were just normal and this was being shown. Whereas what we got were caricatures who you were immediately told, oh, these people are nuts, don't trust them. And it's like, sure, having a bad neighbor speaking from experience, having bad neighbors can be a terrible experience. But if you're on the day you're moving in, there's just people watching you with binoculars, and then there's other people just wandering in and out of your house. Like that, it was such an over-the-top caricature of bothersome neighbors, and then it just went wildly in the direction of all of these people are suspects, except there was no, for a supposed suspense story, there was no suspense. It was just an immediate, here are all the bad people. Here's the bad people.
Yeah.
Also, here's this unexplained plot twist. Here's that person that you never find out who they are. Like it's
like
as Wafflefrog said, the most realistic thing about the show is the house market. It's terrible.
It's interesting. Like you've got this family that are interacting with like new neighbors and things like that. They've got the realtor that sold them the house, which she kind of becomes pally with the mum, because they're like old school friends. The mum is like used to live around the corner, that kind of thing, as in she knows the area very well, and the mum's kind of moving back to the suburbs, and she's meeting people who she used to go to school with. There's two main neighbours groups. So there's a woman who lives with her brother, I think, and there's
who is supposed to be schizophrenic, whatever, or something else.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to have like he's supposed to have some sort of PTSD that kind of froze his development. And so he behaves like a child, and one of the first kind of spooky scenes is this grown man effectively hiding in the dumbwaiter inside the house. So there's like a lot made about the dumbwaiter. The sister that he lives with and kind of is a carer for him is very obsessed.
Mia Farrow, by the way.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that until the end. I was like, oh. But she's like very interested in the house's architecture. Says it's very historic, and the dumbwaiter is like so important, and all the rest of it.
Which in the real story, it didn't exist.
Yeah, it's like utter like fabricated shit for like spooky factor. But I don't buy it. And then of course there's a husband and wife who are just strange, they're
what was the name? Mo? Was it Mo and something else?
It was two M's. It was Mo was the woman, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he's played by that guy who's in Scrubs, who's always concerned that he's got an illness or an affliction of some kind. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's not a bad actor. But yeah, one of the things for me is like I hated how everyone in the village was like just not larger than life, but they were all weird. They were all like completely suspect. Mm-hmm. The show didn't want to have. To be honest, I thought it would have been better as like a Hot Fuzz type thing. Like
it almost would have been, yeah.
Like they should have just Hot Fuzzed it, and it was like they were either all in on it or like everyone was extremely friendly or just normal. But instead they have to have all the kind of, you know, colourful casts.
It almost felt like, and I don't know how true this is because the family maintains that they have nothing to do with the Netflix series. It almost feels like the family taking a swipe at the community that wouldn't let them sell their house. So for those unaware, the family tried to sell their house to an LLC when they were trying to move. This LLC offered them a lot of money. They were going to turn it into they were going to knock it down and turn it into a duplex. And the local community said, no, this will affect our housing value. We don't want this. You can't do that, which meant the family stayed trapped in the mortgage whilst they couldn't live there. So fair dues, I would be annoyed about that too. But it almost felt like it was a swipe being taken at the locals and saying, well, look, they're all crazy. They're all, they're all, for me, it felt like a kind of like, let's demonize everybody in the community. Like, they literally are talking about them as if like, oh yeah, there's a whole cult, there's a satanic cult that uses tunnels under the house to steal children. Like, that was a literal plot line at one point.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
it's weird.
I don't think the family had much input beyond don't actually make it our family, because the family had 3 children and the one in the show only has 2, and apparently they also said, "Can you please burn the house down?" at the end of the Netflix show.
Yeah,
which I suppose is also kind of like passively
catharsis.
yeah. But yeah, the whole it is atrocious from start to end. So like they receive the letter in the show. The letter is different from the letter that the family have received, because I think, you know, they changed the wording and they edited it and they made it they tried to make it more scary. A couple of things happen like at the start that are really like out there. For some reason, the son has a ferret as a pet, and this is like the cheapest fucking shock value ever. But guess what? The pet dies, and the pet's found in the middle of like the corridor, dead. And the police in the town are completely useless. You know, they say, oh well, the ferret might have just ran into a wall quickly, or like, you know, it's that kind of, it's the kind of show where nobody's competent at all.
Trigger warning for anyone involved: the ferret dies in the first episode, and then in the very last episode, a dog is killed purely for shock. You know. That annoyed me a lot.
We'll come on to that one at the end, but a dog dies at the end, and it is the absolute like cheapest like last attempt at a scare. It is.
Yeah, the animals exist to be abused in this show, and it's not fun.
Yeah, it's not good. There's a couple of weird subplots that don't really go anywhere. So as we kind of said, like, so the dad has cashed in like all of the family's savings in this show, and he works at some sort of, whether it's a hedge fund or whatever it is, he's trying to become partner, and he's in that kind of bracket. He's like, he gets by okay, but he doesn't earn shitload. Well, he has enough to buy a 3.3 million house, so fucking. Take what you want. But
it's implied that he's not good with money and he caused them to go bankrupt before.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of, he's a very high up managerial type person, but it's implied that he's very bad with money and the family's been struggling. The wife has her own art, which is another subplot that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And she's trying to make a living from her art. And it's this whole thing that she's, an artist who makes beigest vases you've ever seen in your life, and apparently they sell for thousands. Which fair enough, but it was another plot line that just went nowhere for me. It was like, why is this in here?
Yeah, and well, I mean, the plot doesn't go fucking anywhere. It exists to be like, I can kind of see what they're trying to do with it, but basically that whole art plot exists as a reason that the mum could live independently, and there's like a lot of focus on their marriage and whether they'll remain together, and yeah. So again, we'll touch on that. But one of the kind of earliest things that happens is they get the letter. The family naturally gets spooked. The police are driving past their house every 2 hours or hour or whatever, but that's not enough. The letters are still getting delivered. Upon the second or third letter, the dad then spends more money and pays this kind of young African-American guy $7,000 to basically secure the house. So cameras up, sensors on the windows, alarm system put in, and the 19-year-old ends up flirting with the 16-year-old daughter, which is already...
yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's as the show points out, it is legal in their state.
Yeah,
but it plays into the dad suddenly being very misogynistic towards the daughter. Like, there's a thing where she puts, the thing with the lipstick, she finds a lipstick in the vanity of her new bedroom and she puts it on. Like, why would you put on a used lipstick you find in a house you've just moved into? That's how you get herpes. That's not good. Like, that's not a good way to do that.
Yeah.
And the dad turns into a whole, no, you're too old for makeup. Is that eyeliner? Wash that. And he goes very kind of like uber alpha protective male. Like, this is my daughter, you will do as you're told. And apparently he's not like that before they move into the house. And it's implied that the house is making him this uber conservative religious man, and the house is driving him insane, a la, American Horror Stories and the Amityville Horror series. And it's a weird take because the house itself is not possessed, but there's these weird little things where it's implied that the house is doing these things. It's going that you can tell that the dude that wrote an American Horror Story because he's obsessed with the house as an entity, even though that's not what this actually is.
And even though you've got the letters essentially turning the house into an entity, it never comes across as particularly strong. And what you find is that the letters completely fall away throughout the series as well. Like the dad, I was getting really fucking annoyed with the dad because it was like the most, like, they were at the dinner table and I think like the daughter was wearing like a top that just had like her shoulders revealed, it was literally like that, and he was like, I can see your bra strap, that's disgusting, that's he just goes off on one.
We moved to the suburbs to avoid this because bra straps don't exist in the suburbs.
And like the thing that really annoyed me about that plot is that, like, it also just existed to cause, like, further drama in the family. Because, like, while the dad is behaving like a total dick to his daughter, the daughter then ends up fucking almost having the guy, like, kill himself. Like, I think that, like, it would be close to that. So he basically finds out that the 19-year-old boy has been sending nudie pictures to his daughter, and his daughter in return has been sending kind of nudie pictures back, and he goes absolutely nuts, right? As you would kind of do anyway if you heard that your daughter was sending nude pictures. You'd obviously want to, like, you'd be angry. You would also be like, you're a 16-year-old and you can't be sending that to fucking anyone. Because the moment it goes...
because the show makes a point of it. It's a Romeo and Juliet law case where, although she is technically not of age, he is within the age range where it's acceptable for them to be together.
Yeah.
What she cannot do is send pictures because that is child pornography.
Exactly.
And that's never brought up. It's purely about the relationship between I hesitate to call him, he's a teenager still. He's 19, is a teenager. And he does even say, like, when she starts coming on to him, it's a very much, he's like, oh, I could get in trouble for this. And she's like, oh, isn't that part of the thrill? And it's like, if you are old enough to know that you can get in trouble for something, you're old enough to shut it down.
Yeah.
But,
and I also found like
weird
when the police come to the house, so the dad challenges the boy because he's obviously found the photos on his daughter's phone, so challenges the boy, and the police have already been called because I think the daughter calls the police on the dad.
Because he's outside shouting at the boy.
Yeah, and it's funny that the dad never makes the point that he possesses the pictures of his daughter. Like he never makes the point that the boy like has pictures of his 16-year-old daughter on his phone. He's saying, "Look what this 19-year-old's been sending my daughter," and is like showing the pictures to the neighbors that are like starting to swamp in. Another thing I thought was like kind of sickly, unrealistic was the police believe the boy, the 19-year-old African American boy. It was like, like it doesn't seem like that would be the case in real life. No. So that was another one. But basically, all this transpires, and to get back at the dad, the daughter steals the brother's iPad and makes a TikTok video saying that...
Which goes viral.
Which goes massively viral to the point where he gets questioned at work about it and all the rest of it. She says that the dad's a massive racist and is keeping the two of them apart because he's African American. And that impacts pretty much everything in the family. Like, I think it impacts the membership at the country club. It impacts his job. Like, to be honest, if you went viral like that, and it was one of your kids making that video about you, your life would be over. And obviously, it's it is life ruining, and it.
I mean, the dad could have been fired so many times, because there's also the incident later on with, it looks as if the videos. So the young man who suspects the father of being the watcher. Okay.
So the African American boy.
Yeah. He puts a camera in the parents' bedroom to catch him in the act, supposedly. Yeah. What he actually catches is who appears to be a young underage girl creeping into the father's room whilst he's asleep and getting naked and climbing into bed with him. He does nothing with this information until the father, confronts him about his daughter and everything else, and gets the police involved. And then instead of sending it to the police, the young African guy sends it to the dad's work. The work. It's sent to the boss, basically, and the boss watches it. And how the dad is not fired then and there for the personal drama getting leaked to the CEO of the company, I don't know. Yeah. But nothing comes of it. Like the boss doesn't even go to the police like, "Yo, I think my employee is a pedophile." Like, none of this happens. There's concrete evidence. Nothing happens.
And then there's like a really bad like reconciliation on this as well. So it transpires that the young guy couldn't understand why the dad reacted angrily to him sending the video to the CEO. He was like, I would never do that. So the boy goes through all of the footage since the beginning of when he put the cameras up. Every single angle, every single camera. And the big suspenseful bit is that at no point does the girl in the video in the bedroom ever actually enter the house.
Which is implied that the house is haunted again. Yeah.
So there's a bit of creepiness there, and there's a bit of intrigue, but don't worry, because that plot point is never answered at all. It goes nowhere. It goes absolutely there is nothing. It does not go
not resolved,
anywhere.
It's just left hanging. And then the annoying thing is, it's one of the more intriguing. Like, that was to me the moment where, like, oh shit, are they going to get into the tunnels under the house? Are they going to do this? Like, are we going full horror story? Are we completely going off the rails? This would be good if it was. No, it just never gets ever again.
There's just a there's no season 2, not happening. Absolutely not. It's weird because it's like it's a 7-episode miniseries, which is like
about an hour each.
Yeah, and it is it's bad. It's really bad. And then there's a fake shooting as well. So throughout the throughout the episodes, there's a point where the family, the mum and the two kids are staying at this motel, and the dad is staying in the house to catch the Watcher, to catch what's going on. Mm-hmm. And he hears gunshots in the middle of the night. And doesn't do anything about it. Doesn't look like he calls the police. Goes back to bed. Wakes up in the morning, and two of the neighbours who he's been suspecting could be the Watcher are being wheeled out in body bags or with sheets over them, and they're
and the son of that family says, "Oh, they killed themselves because of you. You did this to them." There's a letter that says you accused them of this XYZ. And then it turns out they're not actually dead. Surprise, they're in Florida.
They went to Florida, and it was their son that went to an old folks' home, found two people of similar body type, took them to the house, and then killed them, and
dressed them in their tracksuits and then killed them. And it is so bizarre. It is absolutely just off the wall.
And then they just it just like they move back into the house and it just resumes, the creepiness resumes. Like they're still watching, they're still at their window, they're still like wearing their tracksuits and being creepy, and then the guy then the dies. Husband then the husband dies, and it's so many.
It's really bizarre.
Yeah, there's so many like weird spikes in this plot, because like there's also quite a bit. There's a fairly good bit with the police officer, and the main detective in it is Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore.
He so is.
The moment I saw him, I said to Jessica, I was like, he eats pieces of shit for breakfast. And she was like, what? And I was like, Shooter McGavin's Happy Gilmore. But it was like he was quite good in it. Like you could see that this is just a bit of fun for him. But there's a good plot point where it's like, are the police being like deliberately incompetent? They send the letters away to get DNA tests done, and there's a whole bunch of like intrigue around that. Are the detectives actually doing their job? Yada yada. And at one point he suggests to the dad, why don't you hire a private investigator? We've not spoken about the private investigator yet, Joy. But I could tell right away that she was just a write-off character. She randomly appears, and I felt like there was so many points throughout all of the episodes where she said she was absolutely confident that one person, she always changed the person, but she was like, oh, I'm really confident it's this person. Oh, I'm really confident it's actually this other person. And it was, and you then get like the cheapest fake out at the end that you told me you were raging about.
I was absolutely furious when it happened. But in fairness, the private detective is one of the best characters.
Yeah.
She has a really satisfying personal drive. She's fantastically played, just excellent. And then it just turns into a fake out. And then she lies to the family to try and give them closure. And it's like, well, you lie to give them closure. What happens when the letters keep coming?
Yeah. So it culminates. So the private investigator has cancer, and she wants to have one last case that she succeeds and solves, and goes all the way through, has like the mind map, the cork board and everything, and goes over it with the mum and dad throughout several episodes. It's like they're a wee gang, and it's like a wee kind of murder mystery thing, because I think that's one of the things, is like the tension in all of those scenes is completely removed. It does sound like a kind of, I don't know, for me it felt very like Stranger Things. Like I've not seen Stranger Things, but it's like, the wee club that gets together. Oh, what's the mystery around town? I thought, like, rather than this family's actually receiving letters that are like threatening their kids and stuff, it felt kind of like, I don't know. It felt very Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo.
Good one, Kate. Yeah, absolutely. It did. It felt very Scooby-Doo. Don't get me started on Scooby-Doo again. But we, at the end, she's lying in the hospital bed and she's like, oh, I did it. I paid for actors to come and tell you this. I suggested to someone who was substance abusing that they'd also received letters, and I used them to talk to you about receiving the letters. And there's just a whole bunch of shit, and it turns out that that's all just fucking lies. Like, at the funeral, the daughter comes up and it's like, oh, by the way, that's 100% pish. Like,
yeah, she made it up because she wanted to give you closure so that you could move on with your lives. And it's like
the moment the daughter said, oh, by the way, she wanted to give you closure, I'd be like, that is the opposite of giving someone closure. Even saying that would, like, imagine fake giving them closure and then it being unveiled once again. But
I mean, it's so like they go through the heartbreak of losing this friend. They have, they lose her as their friend. Holly, what are you doing? But speaking of ghosts in the basement, she's staring down the stairs as if there's something there. There's nothing there. Go back up.
Or so we know.
Or so we know. But it's this whole, like, she's like, oh yeah, they lose their friend. When we lose a major character through this. Yeah. And they go through the mourning process only to find out, oh, she lied. That's not it doesn't give closure. Yeah. And it's you could argue she's doing it because she's got, she's on a bunch of pain meds for the cancer. She's not thinking straight. Like, but at the same time, it's just bad writing. It's just, it's just the
like the last 3 episodes in this are so, like, the pacing absolutely crumples. Like, there's a fair bit of tension building in the first episode, but I think that only comes from being introduced to new characters. Like, as in, like, that's the only tension building that's really there. Obviously, the ferret also dies, and then the son disappears for like 2 episodes, but it's just like in the background. Like, I don't think he gets a single line for like. There's a couple of episodes that the children don't exist in.
And then they reappear with like, oh, I got into the basketball team. Like, yeah, you still exist. Like,
yeah.
Like, it's so weird.
And then they have like weird family meetings that decide about the house, which is just not evident throughout.
They start talking to each other, and you could argue that maybe they're in therapy and that's why they're starting to communicate better, but I don't think they are at that point. It's just the plot has become so convoluted that they become the mechanism for the plot. They're not characters, they are just, I don't know.
They are. Yeah, I mean, they end up just doing things to move. Like, it's almost like they become the entity in which we interact with all the other characters. Like, there's not really that much to them beyond, it's like, oh, the dad has an argument with one of the neighbours next door, and then so then we learn about the perspective of that neighbour. There's also another weird injection of another real life crime into this. Yeah. That is really strange. Like, so there's a character called John in the show, in the Netflix show.
John Grisham.
John Graff. So John Graff is apparently one of the previous owners of the house. And this is back to, like, feeding into the house is the problem. So this guy, John Graff, is a deeply religious man, and he disguises himself as a housing inspector that is overseeing the renovations that the family are making to the house. And there's a bit in it where you get almost like a 15-minute segment about this guy, John Graff, and what his relationship with the house is. And it turns out that the house, like, he also had a daughter that was young and was going to parties, and he had a wife who hated him and it, like, emasculated him and all the rest of it. And he ends up going on a killing spree and killing he kills his mum, I think. His mum, his wife, the daughter, and the son. And there's a big segment given to how, between killing the the daughter and between killing the wife and his mum, he sat down at the table and had a sandwich and he drank some milk. And then the daughter came back in from school and he shot her too. And then he left the house, sat and watched his son's soccer game. And then when they both went home after the soccer game, he then shot his son. Right? And there's a big thing about it. And this all ties into the other neighbour who's the grown man who's got PTSD and his sister's his carer. And, apparently he went into the house and saw the 4 bodies arranged in this pose. And, because he'd posed them on the floor and whatever. And that's, mentally scarred and traumatized that guy for life. So there's so much attention given to this one guy, John Graff, which is pulled from another real-life crime in...
John List, yeah.
From New Jersey as well. A guy called John List. And it's just you've got one crime that's based on a true story and you've just decided to connect it with another fucking crime from the same area.
30 years before. Possibly even 40 years before, because it was 1971.
Which is just fucking jamming the two together. So, there's a big part of the plot given to the dad's trying to find out John Graff. Because he disguised himself as the inspector and he got into the house and, there's the kind of classic scene where he talks to the other builders who are doing the renovations and there's no John Graff who's a city inspector, that kind of thing. And it is bad. It's bad.
It's not good. It's not good storytelling. And it is again playing into it is again the American Horror Story. Is the house is haunted by these murders and the house starts to crave blood.
Yeah,
it was almost as if they didn't know how to make a suspense story out of what is honestly quite a chilling event where your family's being stalked via these anonymous letters. I mean, there were so many ways you could have made this creepy. There were so many ways you could have had how this affected the family, and what you got was a series of plot points that are not connected. There are too many driving forces of suspense and none of them get resolved. When in a true time story you can't always resolve them. But that just because you can't resolve them doesn't mean you keep piling things onto it.
Yeah, I mean one of the things that they try and draw a connection to the real life event is obviously the real family were traumatized and there was counseling and therapy for things like PTSD. And they try and showcase that in the show. They try and, throughout the episodes, they actually try and show the dad's decline. The dad can't think about anything else, so he's not doing well at work, so he doesn't get partner. So, that adds more financial pressure to the family and, this, that, and the next thing. And the problem with them doing that is that, the letters actually fall away from the plot entirely at one point. There's episodes where there's not a new letter or there's a letter only in a flashback and things like that. And it doesn't really bring anything to the party. And we haven't really spoken about the realtor either. Maybe you can touch on that, Joy.
Jennifer Coolidge, fantastic. She says the word cunt fantastically.
Yeah.
But it's such a, the realtor character is in on it. She wants to drive the it's this whole oh, you always thought you were better than me. I'm going to force you out of this house and I'm going to buy it for less and I'm going to live this house because I deserve it. It's very much gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss. And honestly, the last 30 minutes of the show with her are what a good suspenseful horror movie should be, because she is suddenly getting harassed by all these things.
It was the most tense that the show was. It was there's obviously hints throughout that she's potentially in on it and is trying to drive the family out, and she's the friend of the mum who's constantly urging her to divorce the husband and sell the house, and your artwork's doing so well, and this, that, and the next thing. And it ends with her getting the house cheaper because she buys it through the LLC, and she ends up paying a lot less than what the family bought it for, which is great. So she's successfully, she sees herself as having successfully won the house from her rival in high school, right? And so she's in the house. She's rude to the neighbours who come to the door with a baked pie and blondies and all this sort of shit. And she's got a dog, and I think she's in the kitchen or something like that, and she hears a dripping sound, and she runs upstairs, and the bath's filled to the brim, and it started to like drip down the hall and then down the staircase, and the dog's been like drinking the water. So she goes in and she puts her hand in the bathtub, and it's obviously burning. And then she doesn't think much of it. She tries to phone the detective who's had enough. They were supposed. She's
apparently been dating this whole time.
Yeah, there's that they cram that in at like the last couple of episodes where it's like, so she's been dating the detective, and then like the family assume that they're both in on it and go on a rant to them. But they've now broken up, and she's like, she made fun of his erectile dysfunction, and like that's all like implied.
Which is a weirdly reoccurring theme through the whole series.
Yeah.
Is that the women aren't getting enough dick, and that's why
fucking hell, yes.
Bad things are happening. Like there was at least 5 points where I was just yelling, "Get a vibrator. Just get a vibe." Like it was so like, oh, if your husband's not satisfied, it's like, you are literally in a situation where you are being stalked. You have no money. You're losing everything, and you are worried about the fact that you're not getting enough dick.
Yeah, it was. There was a couple of moments in it where I think it was like the day that he got told that he wasn't partner, and he then hyper focuses on solving the Watcher problem, because he knows that that's like the barrier to how he's getting on with his family and his job, and he can't think of anything else. So he's sitting and he's just trying to get into the zone of like, how can I actually find out who the Watcher is, and then it's like the kind of wife just leans in and it's like, you got some cock for me? And he's like, he looks up and he goes, what? And she goes, it's fine, and fucking storms out, and he's just left there going, wait, what?
I mean, he's literally trying to figure out who's stalking them, and she's mad that priorities. I also got really annoyed at one point because they're in the basement where one of the letters says, I would hate for the children to be in the basement so far from the top of the house where they cannot hear you, but you would not hear them scream.
Yeah.
So what do the parents go and do? They leave the children upstairs in their bedrooms with no one around. They go into the basement and drink wine.
Yeah.
Whilst talking about this horrible person that's sending them these threatening letters, threatening their children, going, I'm sorry. Maybe I just have different idea of what parenthood should be. But if that's happening, I would not make sure that I was as far away from my children as possible and then get drunk in the basement.
Yeah. There's
like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
So like it ends, so throughout it, the family actually, so the renovations are going on. They were renovating the basement. They renovated the kitchen first, and then it was the basement. And the renovators oh, by the way, there was a really, really cold draft coming from this particular wall. And look what we found. And they basically pull this like wooden board up, and there are tunnels. There are fucking shitloads of tunnels. It's like a maze underneath the house. It clearly goes like all over the town. It could literally be, whatever. It is the access point to the house, if not from anywhere else. It is like the creepy entrance.
Which I will say do exist in some houses that date back to Prohibition, because that's how they smuggled booze. That it was a real thing. It's not so far-fetched.
Yeah.
What was far-fetched is that it took them, as Kiwi's pointing out, why would you renovate the basement second? Because they end up tracking everything through the lovely kitchen that they've just finished renovating. And it's so bad. And then as soon as they find it, the dad starts charging off down the thing. I'm like, no, fuck that. I would immediately call the police, or I would be like, hey, who do we call about this? And I wouldn't just start running down the darkened hallway with dragging your wife is begging you to come back, and you're going, you're fine, come on.
And then there's an attempt at a jump scare where like there's someone running like 5 meters ahead of them down the tunnel, and they see them because they drop the torch and then they pick the torch back up, and then someone's legging it down the tunnel, and like the big chase happens and the music goes up and all the rest. But back to like when Jennifer Coolidge's character has the house, the dog's barking in the basement, so she goes down to the basement and the dog's barking at a wall, so she starts banging on all the walls and then stops and then walks out and leaves the basement and calls the dog to her, and the dog kind of just trots up, and then I think she goes back to bed, wakes up, and then they've fucking killed the dog. They have...
Yeah, she wakes up and the dog's just lying dead.
The dog's lying dead in the middle of the hall, just like the ferret, and like that's the big shocking thing. And then there's a weird bit where a hooded figure comes out of a trapdoor built into the stairs.
Yeah, that was like, how the fuck do you renovate your whole house and not notice a trapdoor in the stairs?
Yeah.
It was so bizarre. Like, as someone who lives in a house that is a disaster, there are so many things you start... As soon as you peel wallpaper up, you notice the weird shit.
Yeah.
And it's just so bizarre to me that they're like, oh, we did all these major renovations and we're just finding the hidden trapdoor in the staircase. Like...
Yeah. And, like, I mean, it ends with her looking at this person who's come out the trapdoor, screaming, and then it cuts to her running down the street. Don't know why she couldn't ID the person or whatever. Like, I guess it's dark and they're wearing a hood, but it's like, it's so... I don't know. I found the ending, particularly the ending with the dead dog, I was like, that is cheap as fuck. Because it wasn't like a dog that we've seen the whole season. Like, it was a dog that was in that episode for about 5 minutes to be killed. Which really annoyed me, because it's like...
Yeah, I ended up cuddling Holly Muck. She was sleeping at the end of the bed and she just suddenly woke up because she was getting lifted up, and I was just like, no, just hugging my baby. But it was just the animals just exist to die in this show. Yeah. So if you're someone who is very sensitive to things like animal death, don't watch it because it's horrible. Like, it's literally just there to be shock value.
Yeah. That's what like the ferret's the exact same thing. So like, I'm sure someone will do a deep analysis of the ferret dying in the first episode and the dog dying in the last episode, but it was like both times were just fucking cheap as shit. Like, it would have been more fun to have the ferret actually find the tunnel or fucking anything, it's like, I don't know, it was very weak. And then it culminates with a kind of spooky, like, the dad... like, the family have left the house now, but the dad can't give up.
We see him in therapy.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he's finally moving on, but then he takes every opportunity to talk about the house, like, I mean, he's become obsessive with it, which I would too.
Yeah.
To be fair, like, I'm someone who wants, I know what PTSD can make you very obsessive. And the therapist, I thought for sure the therapist was going to be in on it too or something.
Yeah.
It was set up in such a way where you couldn't trust anybody. So I'm like, he's going to finish this therapy session and the therapist is going to pull out a typewriter and he's just going to be typing the letters or something.
Yeah.
That was how bizarre this whole thing was. I'm like, is it the therapist?
Yeah.
Like...
but it was to the point where it wasn't a good everyone's a suspect. It was like they've the way that they kind of passed characters around or introduced characters, it was like, well, everyone here is evil and bad. There's no redemption. And like again, the ending scene is the dad parks up outside the house and like talks to the new owner, saying, "Oh, this is a lovely house," and it's like he's become... There's like a montage of like everyone in the town like watching the house, which I thought was really weak because it's
again leaning so heavily on American Horror Story because that is what happens. The ghosts end up obsessed with the house and they can't leave, and anyone that becomes associated with the house becomes obsessive with it. And I'm going, Ryan knows how to tell one story.
Yeah.
doesn't know how to tell any others. And the annoying thing is, I enjoyed American Horror Story when it first came out. I remember being very creeped out by it. I still like some of the later series. I like some of their short story stuff, just because it's that kind of campy, creepy a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work for this. And when you have a true crime story that is genuinely scary, and you turn it into, I don't know what this was supposed to be. It felt like an amalgamation of throwing ideas at a dartboard, and then instead of picking the best one, they just picked all of them.
Yeah.
And it's really weird. It's really frustrating from a storytelling aspect, because I'm sitting there like I did a lot of Gothic horror when I was younger. I did a lot of recent. I'm a ghoul. Like I'm very big into scary stuff. I used to love all that sort of thing before I developed my heart problems, which meant I can't watch it anymore. But I was watching it and I'm like, they're missing so many narrative beats. And even for true crime stuff, you have to have the narrative beat to because they exist in life as well. Like it's you can take the things that happen and make them creepy. You can elevate them to the realm of horror. But the way this was done, it was just a case of, I'm going to regurgitate the last 6 seasons of American Horror Story and put it into one show. And basically put it into 7 episodes. And it's, the whole idea that you can't trust anybody. The neighbours are all in on it, which again was an American Horror Story plot. The house itself is possessed, American Horror Story plot. The father is, having affairs and attracted to younger women, American Horror Story plot. And you can tick them all off and be like, this is a one-trick pony. This is exactly what it is.
I mean, Dragon Saint and Chaz point out, like, a good everyone's a suspect requires the writers to actually know who the perpetrator is. And I think, I mean, the most obvious one for me that I like, there was the outlandish theory that's proposed by a side character about it being like a demonic cult that drinks the blood of children.
But they're vampires, and that's how they stay eternally young.
And then there's the most plausible one, which is like an LLC wants to scare away someone so they can buy the house back cheap, and then like kind of just constantly make profit off of selling this one really nice house, which I thought was like the most plausible one, because you meet the realtor who's evil in it, like Jennifer Coolidge's character, and
the other realtor who
like her boss. Yeah, her boss is like, it turns out they're the LLC, and there's the big bit around that's like super creepy, and it's so, I don't know, it's just weak as fuck. And
it is
like
really weak.
The thing that frustrated me the most is, like, obviously at the end of this, like all of these fucking things, you get based on a true story. The Watcher case remains unsolved, and it's like there's something very frustrating about having that kind of end title sequence when that's not the case. Yeah. Like, I would understand if it was like, okay, this is based on some true life events, which is why I thought it was more of a legal disclaimer at this point, right? It's like, okay, we've actually bought the rights to this story from the family it happened to, but that's the end of it. The letters are the end of it. Everything else is just nothing to do with the actual story. So I got really fucking annoyed at the end where it was like, oh, the Watcher case remains unsolved, as if like all of the events of the past 7 episodes has actually happened.
Yeah, and the thing is, they haven't even really focused on the Watcher. It just became about the personal drama of the family. It just became, the father's instability, the mother having an art show that sold out. I can also just say, she's the beigest woman you've ever seen.
Everything she wore is beige. There's not any colour.
It's really funny because there's the bit where Jennifer Coolidge is putting in pink marble top. She's getting everything getting girl boss, gatekeep, gaslight.
Yeah.
And you don't actually see the mother because she's so beige. She blends in with the curtains.
Yeah.
And then she just appears, and it's kind of like this beige jump scare that happens because she blends. She's so bland. She blends in with the bland Lord Magnolia white. And that to me, like I actually broke down laughing at that point because I'm going, she's been annoying me this whole time, and then the one time you see her wearing a different color, if you see her wearing black, it's when she's telling her husband to get his shit together.
Yeah.
And that's the only time you see it in color.
Yep.
And then she goes straight back to bland.
Yeah.
Color. Yeah. She's very monochrome. She's a very monochrome person, which is it's very much how the characterization is as well.
Yeah.
She's got two settings. She's got outrage at her husband, and then she's got freaking out that she's been about her art, and then also getting, kicked out from the tennis club because that's what rich white people do, I suppose.
Yeah.
I hate it. They kept talking about how they had no money, and I'm like, if you have no money, why are you buying a 3.3 million house?
Yeah.
If you have no money, you live within your means.
Yeah.
There's
the whole part of the plot where like it seems like every single side character is advising the wife to divorce her husband. Which
is fair advice.
which is fair. But like I one of the things that I thought was going to be interesting was I thought that the people in the town would buy her art. I thought it was going to be that they would buy her art to again try and lure. It was like, oh, you're self-sufficient. You can do this on your own. You don't need to rely on your husband who's awful. You can make your own way. Sell the house. But no, it fucking like that plot goes nowhere. And
it would have been. I remember thinking, what if it's a thing to make her feel secure?
Yeah.
It turns out that everyone's in on it and they've done this, and then she suddenly doesn't have money. She's reliant on this community that's harassing her. That would have been a fantastic twist for that plot.
But no, it turns out there's really, really rich people that just love beige vases, and that's like that.
Literally, it's literally the stuff you can get at a Market World here, Old World Market. You walk in and it's like made by it's the kind of basic things that you can get everywhere, and it's apparently selling for thousands a piece, and I'm going, cool, great, fantastic. Do something with this. If this is important enough to be featured in this, you have to do something with it. It
was a total like Chekhov's gun moment where it's just fucking,
I know,
nothing happened with it at all, and you're just sitting there going, fuck, like because it's mentioned throughout the thing. It's not like a one episode thing. It's like her art is a big part, like she was a bit nervous about moving to the suburbs because what happens if her gallery work in New York all goes to no, it's fine. It's she's still fine. She's still able to do all the stuff, and it's just like ugh.
They talk about being poor all the time, and yet they never seem. They're not poor.
They're not. Tell you what,
they talk about how they have no money, and I'm staring at them going, "You have no money, but you're replacing the marble countertop in your perfectly serviceable kitchen because it's not your aesthetic."
Yeah, and it's like we needed a butcher block. We can't have red sauce on the white marble. It'll stain, and it's like fucking hell, guys. Get your. I mean, it's not like you're seeing the family sitting around eating pot noodle. Which would
have been more scary because it's a vulnerable. It's a family because they're able to move back into their old apartment in New York. And they're able to sustain the mortgage and this whilst complaining that they're poor. And I'm like, I hate you. You are the people that will be guillotined first. It was just so annoying.
Yeah.
And like, if you made it into like the whole, it is actually a struggle for them.
Yeah.
But it never is. It's just, and they make this whole thing with the Watcher. They're like, oh, was it greed that brought you to the house? And it's like, well, no, it's not greed. It's aspirations of getting away from crime.
Yeah. And
it's nothing to do with greed. It's only when we get to Jennifer Coolidge's character that it's about greed.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things with just like the size of the house, and obviously like I think I'm not sure if it doesn't do a good job at showing you the size of the house and its like interior. I had no idea whether I think it only one of the Watchers let us say, "Oh, are you all going to be staying on the second floor?" Which means that there's at least 3 bedrooms on the second floor, but like it never, like none of the camera stuff actually shows the scale of the house. You seem to have a staircase that goes up at least twice in the center of the house when you come in, but it doesn't actually show you, all the different rooms. It doesn't do a good job at. I feel like with things like American Horror Story, it does a better job at actually showing the actual
the
rooms
levels of the
like
house.
the levels of the house. Because that's when you have a very tense sequence that's maybe someone's in the house, you immediately have this kind of mental mind map of like what room are
where
they
the
in.
exits are.
Whereas I felt like at least when Jennifer Coolidge was like trying to find who'd broken in, because her alarm goes off. That's what happens. Her alarm goes off on the ground floor, and you know she's walking along and she's like checking every door, and it's like we actually don't know the
layout of the
the
house.
Layout of the house. Yeah.
Yeah, and we never get shown it in full, which is again something that American Horror Story does well, because it shows you the full house. Because there are sequences where you are running for your life. And that adds to the tenseness, because you can relate to what this person is trying to get through. You can see the map in your head and you're going, oh, they're not going to make it because they're on the 3rd floor. They have to get all the way down. And like in this, there is nothing. There is just that they seem to be able to get to the patio doors and the front door with relative ease. They're able to run around the whole house in 30 seconds flat. And I'm going, it seems so... There's no tension behind it. Even when Jennifer Coolidge is running away from people, it just... There was... The final episode is the only episode with the proper suspense that you would expect.
And it's only in like the last fucking 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? But I think probably now's a good time to maybe like pull ourselves out of talking about the Watcher, because I have to fucking... never want to see it again, but like
it's bad. If anyone really likes the actual Watcher, you know, the actual true crime thing, this is not it.
Yeah, like
this is not it.
It's so divorced from the creepiness of the actual letters that it's not worth your like time. And I think that's the issue that I take with something that's kind of true crime. Now, obviously, they tried to make this a wee bit more horror. It's a bit more of a spin. It's not like they are trying to do an actual retelling of they want you to dramatize it a bit. And I kind of get it, but at the same time, I'm very... Like, I'm not a fan of how Netflix pursues, like, crime drama horror-y type stuff like this. We were talking about it a wee bit before, but like Dahmer is
the Dahmer series,
like the Dahmer series for me is like a bit of a red flag. I feel like that absolutely shouldn't be like I've not watched it because I refuse to watch it, because I feel like Netflix does a really good job at glorifying the killers and does very little. They do what
Netflix does best. They do what Netflix does best, which is the killer's so smart, and like how could the police have ever caught this person? And it's just like, you're just doing the police's job for them. You're just propaganda. They're not catching these people because they're criminal masterminds. No, they're catching them because you don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I mean. The stuff with Dahmer's particularly annoying, because you've obviously got families of the victims where it's still very raw, and I mean, to be honest,
families protested it.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think this extends to like true crime. Maybe we're somehow being exploitative as well, Joe. Let's have a wee bit of reflection. We are exploiting the commentary on something that's actually happened and the series that Netflix has made off the back of it. So maybe we are in fact complicit. There we go. That's the self-reflective disclaimer for this episode done. But I kind of take issue with like the kind of wider like true crime. Like I've seen some videos on YouTube where people have tried to emulate a kind of BuzzFeed Unsolved, but it is entertainment for them as opposed to here's a mystery that we can kind of discuss. Now, like, obviously there's things like the Dyatlov Pass, like, unsolved mystery, and you know, it's kind of semi been solved now, you know, like a mixture of like weather conditions and hypothermia and all this kind of jazz. But like like what the BuzzFeed guys were saying about the Watcher case in particular, it's like they normally do stuff that has a bit more distance, like a bit more historical distance. And I find that there's a lot of, I don't want to say amateur, but there's a lot of like highly viewed like YouTubers and like podcasters that like I don't know. I find that there's something really weird of like, oh, today we're going to be talking about a woman that was murdered by her husband, but first here's a sponsorship for Audible.
That makes me uncomfortable. There's a lot. I mean, there's one that gets recommended on my feed all the time, and it's a channel called Monsters, and it's the dude just reading about cases as recent as like 2019, 2020, and it's these horrific cases, and somehow he gets a lot of like court stuff. He gets a lot of evidence, and I watched one of them because I'm like, why does this keep getting recommended to me? I made it maybe 10 minutes in before I clicked off because I'm going, this is ghoulish. Because within watching the 10 minutes, I'd been given 2 ads. Yeah. And I was like, this family died 2 years ago and you're making ad revenue on it. That bothered me. And again, I am someone, I am a ghoul. I like paranormal mystery stuff. I enjoy ghost hunting stuff. I think it's funny. I also like creepy things, shock horror. But there's something about it being so real and still so relevant, and the fact that there are real life people who are saying, please don't make these things.
Yeah.
There was the show that I was talking about to you earlier called The Thing About Pam, which is the story of the Pam Hupp murderer who, she killed 3 people for insurance money. And NBC made it into a very they debuted it as a dark comedy, and the daughters were on TikTok saying, please don't watch this is awful, it makes my mother's killer into like a clown parody of it's again the girl bossification of it, because it's like, oh well, she was so smart to get all this money this way, but then crime doesn't, like, there's this it's a kind of a parody on like the Dateline sort of thing, where it's like that you have the American voiceover and this is what we're doing today, and it's very kind of dramatic and but it's also very tongue-in-cheek, which I do not think is respectful. It is very kind of like you're playing with the lives of people who are still alive, especially because this Pam person framed the husband, and the husband went to jail for several years for a murder he did not commit. And it's very sickening to me that it was played off. I mean, props to Renée Zellweger. She did a fantastic... I watched it before I knew it was actually a real thing. And she did a fantastic job. She was... I didn't like the use of a fat suit, but I thought she acted it really well. You wouldn't almost know it was her in some cases. But it was so weird. And then at the end of it, I was kind of watching it and I'm going, is this real? And then it shows you at the end, it shows you the real pictures of the real people. And I'm like, shit, it is real. And I was looking it up and I'm going, this is horrifying, because the family were like, please don't do this. Yeah. It's in the same vein as the Dahmer things. You had the family saying, please don't do this. And they make money off of it. They make so much money off these things. And it's like, cool, is any of that money going to the family?
Yeah, I think there's also one thing that I really don't like, particularly about the Netflix stuff, is like it never comes up for air. And that's something that bothers me a wee bit. Is like when the drama is so focused on like the killer's apartment and how meticulous the killer was, and like how, for example, the Zac Efron Ted Bundy thing, like how he portrayed himself, like, and don't get me wrong, I totally understand. Ted Bundy was supposed to be charming. Zac Efron looks charming, but I feel like there's not enough of like the kind of coming up for air that maybe some documentaries would actually do. It's like, it's more of the dramatization of the crimes as opposed to here is what happened, because I think it's like, I understand that there's there's always a conversation about the demographic on who actually listens and watches true crime stuff, and there's a higher percentage of women that watch true crime than guys, and I would understand to a certain extent, is like, because these people are like, obviously the killers and the people who commit the crimes tend to be men. There's a lot of crime that is like, obviously gender based, and I imagine that like almost, I don't want to talk about like...
There's an element of trauma control in that you're exposing yourself to the thing so that you can feel in control of it. which is valid. That is a valid trauma response.
Yeah, and there's also probably a little bit of like adrenaline and thrill with it as well. Like, don't get me wrong. And to be honest, there's also probably a knowledge thing. It's like, you know, charming guy who might appear a little bit too charming, you know, it's almost like searching for the red flags in previous cases, you know, like being able to, like, I don't know, just detect it. But at the same time, when it comes to the kind of glorification of the killer, you know, the amount of people who watched like Zac Efron portray Ted Bundy and then mentally went, oh, well, I really fancied Zac Efron in High School Musical. So naturally, you know, oh, him as Ted Bundy's really good. Oh, Ted Bundy himself was quite handsome. You know, that kind of shit.
But there's always been...
There's always been fans. Like,
there's always been fans, but there's also been... You know, there's all these things about women that would write to serial killers and they'd be like, well, you know, they are in love with them. They, you know, and to me, I look at that and go, what is missing in your life that you feel the need to do this? What is going on with you personally that you think that you could change the serial killer?
Yeah.
And it is you know, it's an important, just all waffle fucking TikTok people. Yeah. That is a major thing I take. You know, there are so many people that are now declaring themselves to be amateur sleuths and amateur detectives. And what they're really just doing is exploiting tragedies for money.
Yeah.
And you know, who do you think you are? A corporation? Like, why? You know, it's very unsettling to me that you literally can have, I'm not going to name it because I want the person to have privacy, but there was a disabled person who their case was all over TikTok a while ago, and their own TikTok account got banned because disabled content is often seen as being against their terms of services. But all these people talking about their case, that's fine.
Yeah,
and they're able to get creator money payout from TikTok for that, and I'm going, that's fucked up. Why is that happening?
I think there's a problem where like the true crime, like it's like is one thing talking about historical unsolved mysteries and unsolved crimes of the past, provided there's like a historical distance to them. I'd say that's like its own thing. And I can almost understand, like, you know, the people who still try and solve Jack the Ripper stuff, you know, that kind of thing. Even later than that, you know, that's like fine. But like you've then got the people who analyze the cases that have, like, you know, past couple of years, where there's probably like a bigger concern is people who start to think about active cases. And I think like a lot of people try and follow like more active. Yeah, the Zodiac killer's a more modern example of the kind of, you know, people are still trying to piece together the Zodiac killer's codes.
Which is everyone knows as Ted Cruz. Yeah. That is just...
But like the thing with like the thing with the active cases, like it becomes like dangerous, you know, because you then have
you also risk that you might influence someone who ends up on the jury.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that
there was a thing that I watched and it was about, you know, it was again it was to do with the Pam Hupp case. And the members of the jury had all been influenced. They all went out and gossiped about these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm going, and there's some of them who don't even admit to it. There was a murder case a while ago, and it was, I forget the name, but the man basically killed his pregnant wife. Horrible, horrible case. It's still ongoing. And the jury fully were talking about it in a bar. And they got reported, which meant this guy was able to walk free. And then it went back to trial and he got reconvicted. But I'm going, you can't compromise juries like that. And how many people are just on TikTok scrolling or Instagram scrolling, and they get these ongoing case about this horrible thing. And it's like, how much of that information do you absorb? How much of that bias do you absorb? So you could be sitting there going, yes, I have no prior knowledge of this case, but is that true?
Yeah, I mean, like, to be honest, a really, really clear-cut one that, like, I suppose in a way we can actually also talk about, like, true crime, but, like, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, like,
that was
everyone, that was probably, like, if there is one thing that I would love to point to, and I was like, humanity needs fucking wiped out, was the discourse around that like case. It was horrifying. Like,
I ended up blocking everything I could to avoid it because I found the whole thing was just triggering to me. Like it was just everything about it was bad.
It was the taking sides. It was the ongoing coverage. It was people live streaming it and like, you know, fucking covering the individual like testimonies and fucking everything. It was like there's obviously a reason that it was asked to be broadcast, but like Jesus fucking Christ, it was awful. And the thing is, like it was impossible to avoid the discourse around it. So when it comes to like, you know, jury cases and stuff, if you know, a true crime podcast or whatever for whatever reason turned that case into a viral thing, you know, it's impossible for people not to be aware and be influenced and, you know, or what about this? And I think with a lot of true crime stuff, a lot of people just pontificate kind of endlessly about it, that it's not right.
People also need to know that when, you know, streamers are doing these things, they're getting money for doing it. They're not. It's not journalistic interest. We don't get money for it, but like, you know, TikTok, you make a video, if you have the creator thing active, you can get paid for it. Instagram, you get paid for reels.
Yeah.
So if you're making these off the cuff reels and funny clips and all these sorts of things, reaction clips, they're getting money for it.
Yeah.
And the more sensationalist they can make it, the more money they will get. And to me, it feels bad. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth to think that you would, you know, make money off talking about these things. And just to clarify, we don't get paid for this stream. We don't earn anything from this stream. This is just us chatting.
News just in, all Twitch streamers and podcasters are bastards. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I mean, yes, for different reasons. But it's to me, it's weird. And it's also, again, because I see, you know, my IRS says influencer. I hate it, but it's the content I would talk about. I mean, I would talk about queer rights. I would talk about disability activism. All that stuff gets disabled, and I can't earn money from it because it gets disabled. One of my friends literally just lost her massive TikTok because she talks about polyamory. And yet people that do talk about these gruesome things don't get demonetized. And it's like, what is happening with this? It's literally just more profitable for them to let people talk about these horrific things than it is for us to be like, hey, like this is a, you know, an ableist issue, or hey, this is like a queer issue, and we get banned right away. We are unable to earn from our platforms. And yet these people are able to make money off of essentially harassing victims of crimes.
I mean, like, to be honest, the one thing we haven't touched on with true crime is that there's people who do true crime podcasts who write to victims' families and fucking harass them. And that's obviously
unhinged.
That's like the super extreme end of it. But like, if you have a true crime podcast, YouTube channel, whatever, fucking what you doing writing to the families of the victims? It's like that's like next level unhinged.
And it's you are re-traumatizing the people involved, and that is not okay. And that again was the Pam Hub case. The daughter Maria was saying, you know, this whole thing was re-traumatizing. We'd finally got to a place where we were moving on. We have our own life, and this comes out, and now it's all been dug up again. And it's like, oh, it's almost like you should be waiting until everyone involved is dead, or at least to have their permission.
Yeah, what's about that is like it's obviously harrowing having that happen and then experiencing the actual court case and everything. It's like it is a fucking double whammy. Then going through the like, I mean, I wasn't aware about the Pam Hupp thing at all until you told me prior to this stream. Like that's whether I'm exceptionally sheltered or not, I don't know. But
we
like,
were on the same TV channels as me.
Well, yeah, but like, you know, I have not heard of it whatsoever, and I think there's a problem where, this kind of Netflix thing actually shares it with a much wider audience than what the family who originally had it happen to them were exposed to when the case when the crime was actually committed. Even the news coverage of the crime and the court case on the back of it, like there's a certain probably geographical bubble to that where people like myself will never have heard about it. Putting it on the front page of fucking Netflix, it makes a global spectacle of it to the point where, well, naturally people are going to want to look up photos of the family involved. And a lot of the Netflix shows actually put up real photos. Now, I imagine they must have to get permission of that to post they don't need to get permission.
So there was a lot of them that I've seen is that they have to reach out. And if the family doesn't respond, they can go ahead with it. The family is within their rights to say, hey, take it down, but they don't need explicit permission if it's like public photographs, if it's public records from trials and things like that.
So all it would take is a newspaper clipping of the photo of a family and they'd be like, well, it's in the public domain anyway.
Yes.
I fucking hate everyone, man. Honestly, I just there's some stuff like that just, I don't know. There's like,
to me, it feels awful. It's there's people because it's on their Facebook, it's considered public. I don't like that. But that's the world we live in at the minute.
Yeah.
Different if they're taking the photos off your phone, but they're saying, well, you posted it, you wanted it to be public, so we used it. But again, there's there are some people who a good example would be the Pamela Anderson deal.
Yeah,
she begged them not to make it, and they made it anyway.
That was fucking scummy. And what's worse with that actually is, and I struggle to give this is, I can't remember if this was a conversation that me and you were having, or it might have been actually last week.
Probably.
Maybe last week, but it's like I really struggle to give a fuck about certain celebrities experiencing. Yeah, it was last week. It was like I struggle to care about celebrities being in kind of like socially difficult situations that's concocted. Like Lily James, who played Pamela Anderson, reached out to Pamela Anderson several times, and Pamela Anderson said, please don't take the fucking role. And she just went ahead and did it. And I feel like it's a very rich person problem to be like, oh, sorry, I was already contracted for the role. I was already being paid fuckloads to play you in a TV show that goes extremely invasive into your life. It's so the problem with the Pam Anderson thing, the Starry Sky, is that it was, I think it's like public domain kind of news story. I don't know if they actually needed to get the rights, because it wasn't it wasn't a story that specifically happened to her. There was some technicality where they didn't need her specific approval to get the rights to the thing. Which I don't understand how that works, because obviously for the Watcher, they did actually need to get the rights from the family. I don't know what the difference is there.
As Celosia 89 points out, they had the rights to a book about it. So it's based on the book, not her real life.
Oh, fuck. Jesus, okay.
So it's technicalities. It's technicalities within technicalities. It's to do with, she can't copyright her life story.
Right. And so that seems a bit strange. So basically anyone, it's like someone could write a biography about my life, right? And someone could then purchase the rights to the biography about my life and then make, that would be the most boring fucking TV show in the world. I mean, the China and Russia stuff would be quite fun, but aside from that, but yeah,
mine
so
would just be repeat medical trauma that no one wants to watch.
But that, so someone could do that. So the biography could be the rights to the biography could be sold to a TV studio, and the TV studio could then, without ever getting approval from me, go, well, we own the rights to the biography, which is the story of your life, so we'll just make it anyway. Oh man, the entertainment industry's fucked, isn't it?
It's things where they can still get sued for, it's someone saying her image, her name, but it depends on what things they've also said. You know, she can sue for defamation and slander and all these things, but it's whether that holds up in court, because they can turn around and say, well, actually, it's not about you, it's about a book based on you, which can be seen as, you know, fiction.
Fuck,
just because it resembles the truth doesn't mean it is the truth.
That's
again
fucked.
Based on a true story. It's not this is a true story. It's based on a true story.
So I kind of feel like based on a true story must be a legal disclaimer then.
Probably. Like, it can also be used entirely fictionally. There's actually a thing on Hulu just now called The Amish Witches, based on a true story. And it's basically it's almost like a Blair Witch style documentary. And it presents itself as completely factual, but it is not. And it's using the based on a true story to heighten the horror element. So based on a true story serves purpose in that it enhances the story, but it can also be a legal disclaimer that it's not the true story, but it is based on it.
So right, so as Hex is saying in chat, it's effectively a marketing gimmick that that probably helps fuel authenticity, but also might be used as a way to cover your arse if you get a defamation suit.
Yes.
That's fuck. see, every time I tell a fucking story from now, I'm gonna go, this is based on a true story. but what
that way you can just take liberties with it.
What it's based on is this tiny slither of truth where I was partly involved at the start of it, and the rest is just made up.
Yeah, as Tundra points out, it's the same as in any fictional book where it has to say the similarity to any person's living or dead is coincidence. Like, I have to put that in my book because I parody certain people from history, but you have to have that anyway, regardless of what you're writing, because someone can turn around and go, oh, you based that on me, and you can prove it. You know,
I'm filling out the court documentation just now for Fiddledy. I feel like I was parodied to the nth degree.
It's funny for me because my book is populated with people from Patreon, so it is based on, there are characters that are based on real people, but it is obviously not the real people because, you know, they're not vampires, so it's that we know. But it's that kind of thing where I'm like, I have to be like, this coincidental, but also here is the people that paid to be in the book.
That's cool.
So it was weird, kind of like when we were looking at the legal phrasing for that. Like, do we need to alter the legal phrasing? I don't think we do. I think it's just a kind of, as long as it's mentioned somewhere that these characters are actually cameos.
That must be super interesting from like a legal perspective as well, because like obviously books don't really have like a terms and conditions. Like, it's not like you're like clicking the button when you're like buying software or whatever. But like,
there were some people when they signed up, they actually said to me, there were some people that were involved in military, some people that were involved in government, and they said, you can do this, but you can't do this. And I was like, that's fine.
Yeah, but it's like
other people
can't...
were just like, I just want my name. Like, that was, you know, that was it. But there were some people who were very much like, if you Google me, don't use this. And I'm like, cool.
Right, okay. It's interesting because like you can't withdraw consent from that. Like, I could, like, let's say I started to disagree with, I don't know, Spotify or like Facebook terms and conditions. I have the right to withdraw that and obviously deactivate my account, and be in accordance with like GDPR or whatever. They have a certain amount of time to delete all the data associated with me. Up to a period. There might be some legal cases where, you know, they might be required by law to hold data on me for up to 2 years. But it's like, you can't, like, once a book's published, you can't be like, oh, can you withdraw me from that? It's not how it works.
Yeah.
So like, there must be more legal kind of, like, there must be a stronger almost legal backdrop to doing that for books, I'm guessing.
I mean, that again, it's that whole, you know, the terms at the front, which is, you know, any resemblance is coincidental, so that you can turn around and say, well, that's not actually me, it's just my name. Or it's, you know, some people chose a fictional name, but they wanted certain characteristic, or they, you know, they chose their own, like, a lot of people use their online handle. Yeah. But I have had people, interestingly, they, including my illustrator, legally changed their name. And, it was a case of, some people reached out saying, if you're doing any further books, could you do this for the next book? Could you change the name in the forward or whatever, or change the name of the illustrator? I went the extra mile. I'm actually in the process of changing some of the names for the current prints.
Oh, cool.
Just because I can, because I have to update some stuff anyway. But if I wasn't updating those things, I wouldn't be able to do that, because every time you update these things, it costs money. You have to pay to have your files redistributed and the processing and everything else. But I went back through and I'm editing. My illustrator's name is now Rai. So if you've got a book that was previously illustrated by Jen Hickman, hold on to it, because it's about to become very rare. But
that's cool though.
The new stuff is going to be under a different name. And I also had some people that were Patreon supporters. They're like, I'm changing my name. And there were some people that for the hardback, I was able to get their name changed in for the hardback release, though not for the current paperbacks, though I will be updating the paperbacks as well, because I have to update other files. But it's one of those things where, legally it costs a lot of money to change things. So if someone turned around to me and said, I want my character removed, it's several $100s for me to go through that process. So it's that kind of like, when people sign up, I'm like, you realize this is not supposed to be about you. It's the support for this and blah blah blah. And but there are some people who I know, who there's a romance author who's notorious for writing about her current relationships, and then when they go shit, she murders the guy. Like one of the characters, the main romance, people just got hit by a bus or something. That's a fun way to find out that relationship's over. But I'm going, you shouldn't be basing characters directly on people.
Yeah.
Because of that, because it can end up being, they've made me into the villain. That's slander.
Yeah. I feel like it also runs the risk of like, I know obviously there will be like characters that are very much wholly made from like someone's you are that character in my mind and I based everything about that character for you, but it must be kind of like limiting to an extent, because like let's say you were to write me as a character, for example, like you would be limited in what you would have me do and how I behave just based on only your interaction with me. So like, I suppose there's got to be that, like, even if it was like 60% based on an individual, you still need that 40% where you're allowed to kind of wander and make it different. Otherwise, I feel like you'd get really quite stilted characters. But like everyone in the fucking Watcher. Don't watch The Watcher.
Don't watch it. We suffered, so you don't have to.
It's like don't become a watcher of The Watcher. We had to say it once this episode. It was like, sorry, I've realised that my auto framing camera is really following me about all over the show. I am fucking all over the place. I'm turning it off. I'm sorry.
That's why I don't have the auto track on, because I move too much.
Everyone said that it looked way better in like a previous stream. They were like, "Oh, the auto framing is really good because it looks a lot more cinematic and it's like it's closer." It looks dreadful. I move around too much. It's over. Sorry, everyone. Sorry for those of you who've been thrown off by me fucking bobbing around for the better part of an hour and 50 minutes at this point.
And if you're listening on Spotify, you're grand. You don't have to see it.
Yeah, exactly. Lucky you. But yeah, I think like just kind of pulling it back to like the whole true crime thing. I went through a phase of really liking the kind of unsolved mystery stuff. Like,
yeah, I think still do.
There's a whole bunch of like legacy mysteries that are really, really interesting. Like I think there's like one called the Hinterkaifeck Murderers that is like it's a really, really creepy story about like a fucking German village or something like that. You know, it's like way back. It's like on a farm or whatever. Like, you know, kind of 1800s or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, the remote farm one. Like it's a dead creepy one. That was like one of the first ones that I read. It was really interesting. But like see that like the modern stuff that covers like, you know, fucking crimes from like either current crimes or crimes that have been in the past like 5 years. like even fucking 10 years. You know, it's like I don't necessarily agree with the Ted
The thing
Bundy or
is,
the Dahmer ones.
The way the legal system works, crimes that are dated within the last 5 to 10 years could still be going to trial.
Yeah.
And to me, that if it's still an ongoing trial situation, I don't think it should be getting covered. Just because it could influence things, it could influence public opinion. It could, to me, it's a very tricky thing, and I don't think people realize that court proceedings can take a very long time.
And I'm trying to remember what actually kicked it all off on Netflix. Was it that Making of a Murderer one?
Probably.
I think that was the one. I'm so glad I didn't watch that, because I remember so many people talking about it, and I thought, all of you are fucking insufferable. I didn't enjoy that whole thing, and I think I've been vehemently anti like Netflix docu series dramatizations since that, to be honest.
There was that the Anna, what's her name, the heiress scammer,
Inventing Anna.
Anna.
Did they not give her money to?
They did a lot of money.
They paid her for the rights to the story, which I think she was then able to use to partly pay back the fine that she was given. I can't say for certain whether that was the case, but it's like if she was fined for defrauding people, I find that they try and I've heard that like in the series, like they try and almost spin her as a kind of Robin Hood type person, that like all the people she was defrauding were rich anyway. But it's like,
well, yeah, she used to become rich. That's not how Robin Hood.
Yes, it's like not Robin Hood at all. But yeah, I don't know. I find Netflix's hard on for a bunch of like based on real crime stuff at the moment is like, to be honest, it makes me want to cancel my Netflix subscription, because there's not much good on it anyway. I think the last thing I watched on it was the Cyberpunk Edge Runner thing, which was fine.
It is repeatedly
good animation.
The Witcher. That's pretty.
The Witcher as opposed to The Watcher.
But it's Netflix really, really. I mean, I've also seen it on Hulu. Obviously, Hulu stream from other platforms. It's not just Hulu Productions. But the true crime stuff is a huge moneymaker.
Yeah,
it is a huge moneymaker, and the reason it's a huge moneymaker is because people watch it. Because we're a morbidly curious species.
Yeah,
let's be real. We love mysteries and drama, but you could. It's cheaper than making fictional stuff, because you don't have to pay rooms full of writers to come up with a world, a crime. It's a very cheap way of making money and making drama. And it's exploitative. It is. And it goes back to them not being willing to pay writers. It goes back to writers' unions saying, well, we want to do this murder mystery show. And it's like, okay, well, how much will that cost? No. Okay, well, we can do a true crime series for half that. And it's...
I was like, again, capitalism. Who would have thought? We're actually mandated to say that once per episode.
We are. It is the only reason we don't get cancelled. But it's very just kind of, I don't know. It feels very skeevy. It feels very kind of a commitment to doing the low cost thing that creates the most amount of drama, and it bugs me. It does. I mean, fair dues, if anyone listening or watching does enjoy these things, more power to you. It's not my thing. I would urge people to think about people that are being exploited in this case. It's not just the families, it's also like they're using it to get around actually creating good content. They're using it so they don't have to write Murder, She Wrote. They're using it as a way of generating cheap entertainment. Yeah, and I think it's Netflix. They don't need cheap entertainment.
Yeah, they've got the money to invest in good stuff. One of the other things, and one of the other, I don't want to say excuses, but like I did see a kind of pushback against people who were saying don't watch the Dahmer series because the family are, pushing back against it and they didn't want this to happen. They were saying, well, I live in a capitalist nightmare and I want to be entertained, was their pushback. It's like, I want to watch this series for entertainment because my life is shit. and I have to work in a capitalist system. Therefore, I want cheap entertainment that is at the expense of the victims' families. And
to me, that it is gross. That is,
that's
completely. It's when people like, I get people saying to me, "Well, we live in a capitalist society, therefore I should be able to read your book." And this was when the Amazon was actively taking the refunds from me, from my bank account. And I was like, cool, and I'm disabled and I can't afford, I also live in the same society as you, and I can't afford to have my work exploited. Obviously not as dramatic as what goes on with the families, but it's a very hyper individualistic sense of entitlement to, I want to numb the world. And so do I. I don't want to be, I want to be numbed in the world too. But I also still have a shred of humanity in that I don't want it to be at the expense of others. I will happily wait longer. I will pay more for video games if people are not getting crunched. I will wait for books if it means the author is getting work done. It to me, it is very, people have no concept of other people's suffering. And it's weird. It's really, really weird for me to see that. And people saying, it's how I get, cope with the world. Cool. How about we try and band together to make it better? Like, that's...
Yeah.
We're encouraging bad behavior at this point because we want escapism. Escapism used to mean, watching Doctor Who or whatever, Murder, She Wrote, or, fiction. Escapism should be fiction. It should not be the exploitation of people that went through these traumatic things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to be honest, that's yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't be a dick. Right? No, I think like what we've tried to do in this is obviously talk about how dreadful the Watcher series is, but I think like looking at the Watcher, it's kind of like unearthed some rather deep-seated feelings for ourselves in regards to like the actual. It's almost like a true crime industry at this point, and I mean it is an industry.
It is an industry,
and it's one that should pivot to respect the victims more, and. Yeah, there's not really much more we can add to that. Also, Netflix, stop making really shitty series. Thank you.
I've just realised that Mothman has put Holly Mop's ears and pigtails in the background. For anyone watching, you can now look at the screen. You can see her being very pissed off.
Top tier content. Right, so I think this is probably a good time to wrap up the podcast. For those of you who are watching the stream, it will sound like we're wrapping it up. We say this at the end of every episode. We will still be here and we'll chat to you for 10-15 minutes afterwards.
Chat with us.
But for those of you who are listening, you can obviously join the stream at 8 o'clock BST. Joy, what's the time for you?
2 p.m. US Central.
2 p.m. US Central every Sunday. And we'll see you next time.
See ya. Have a good week.
Have a good one, folks. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.